In this video, I will walk you through some basics of how to manage your software development process using a product called Trello. The goal is to provide you with the tools you need to successfully deliver a software product. Trello's role in that endeavor is to help you organize your backlog, track your progress, capture notes and communications, and make your work visible. So without further ado, let's get started. If you've never used Trello before, we start by creating a free account. Navigate to Trello.com and clicking on the Sign Up button. Fill out the registration form by entering your name, email address, and password and clicking on the Create New Account button. After verifying your email and logging in, you are redirected to your Trello dashboard. We will create a new board for your software project. As you can see, it is possible to continue adding multiple boards. Some complex software projects find it useful to have separate boards for different subcomponents. For this tutorial, we will stick with a single board. The next step is to configure your new board to reflect your development process. I will be renaming the default lists as well as add a couple new lists. The lists I'm creating are backlog, ready/planning, in development, testing/review, acceptance, and done. This is a good starting point for most software projects. The process we've defined here is based around the life cycle of a card. A card is a unit of work that adds some value to your software project. This could be a new customer-facing feature, or perhaps something more low-level like a refactoring to improve performance or stability. Let's start with an example. For this example, I'm going to refer to a project from last semester's senior project class called the Virtual Job Fair. This project, amongst other features, allows students to log in and see jobs that have been posted by employers. For this example, let's pretend that our client would like the student landing experience to be redesigned. We can break this down into a few things. First, they would like to update the colors and styles. Second, they would like a list of the most recently added jobs to be displayed. And third, add the ability to search by proximity to some geographical region. Each of these ideas needs to be captured on our board. We'll create a card for each one in our backlog. At the onset of your project, you'll need to meet with your client and capture all their ideas in your backlog. Once all the ideas have been captured, you need to make sure that you and your client agree on priority. It's generally a good idea to keep your backlog ordered to reflect this priority. You need to constantly be in communication with your client to assess priorities, especially as new things are added to the backlog. New ideas may or may not be the next highest priority. You would also create cards for tech tasks. For example, before updating colors and styling in the app, you may want to upgrade your JavaScript frameworks or maybe add Bootstrap to your project. So we now have our cards created in our backlog and we're ready to get going. I will select the first card on the backlog, since at this point it is safe to assume that it is the next highest priority, and I will move it to the Ready Planning column by dragging it over. I now want to assign myself to the card so that anyone who looks at the board can easily see who is working on what. I do this by clicking on the card and navigating to where it says Members and choosing myself. You may also find it useful to color code the cards. For example, I was once on a team that put all customer found defects in red. When you click on the card properties, you will see the tab for labels and you can choose a color for your card. You'll see that this then appears at the top of your card on your board. You can remove it by clicking on your card again, clicking on the label you added, and deselecting it from the list. The most important thing while your card is in this phase is that you'll want to make sure the scope of the card is well defined and reasonable. You can use the card description, again we reach this by clicking on the card, to capture the functional requirements for this story. In addition to adding the functional requirements, you will also want to attach other artifacts relevant to the card, such as UI mockups. Let's assume that this card was planned and reviewed with your client and is now ready to be developed. At this phase, I'll introduce another useful feature called checklists. When you click on the card, we see the option on the right for checklist. When I click on that, it asks me to give my checklist a name. For demo purposes, I'll call it Dev To Do. Now I can add subtasks to my card, such as write unit test, write integration test, or maybe even write database schema migration. Once the feature has been developed, the developer can then move the card over to the testing review column. Typically at this point, a test engineer or quality assurance analyst would now be responsible for reviewing the work done as part of this card. If the test engineer were to find an issue with something, they can capture it in the form of a comment and then send it back to the in development column. You may have to go through this loop a few times before the test engineer is okay signing off on the card. At this point, we move the card to acceptance, which is where you present the finished feature to your client. Your client will then review to make sure that the finished result meets their expectations. The client may wish to make modifications or have ideas for changes, but watch out for scope creep. You'll have to assess if the change warrants the card being moved back to development or if it should be closed and a new card added to the backlog. Once the client signs off on the card, we can now move it to done. Depending on your infrastructure or your delivery model, you should in theory be able to deploy this feature to production at this point and get it in front of users as soon as possible. Some tips for creating your cards. First, try to write them in such a way that you can complete them within a week. Anything larger than that is probably trying to include too much and should be broken down further. 2. When breaking down a large card, try to slice it up in such a way that all of the resulting cards are adding up to the larger goal incrementally while still providing value to the user. I hope this video serves as a good starting point for managing your software project and you can adapt as necessary for your situation. I wish you the best of luck on your project.